The agenda is pretty light, so we can feel free to add anything in. The only thing that we had left over, this is an issue we started talking about quite a while ago, and then we resurrected it again last week, which was the RCL issue 545. The title of it was Move Security Related System File System Environment Utilities Outside RCL. I think it's evolved a little bit. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at that?
I did. Jaime, is this a Neprosima guy? Looks like it might be micro ROS related, in which case maybe you could represent this here. Well, maybe not. So if I may give a little bit of background in case people are not up to speed on this, the idea is there are some environments that don't have a file system, and Roger, I actually seem to remember you adding a little bit of context to this and saying that environment variables would actually be off limits as well. Does this ring any bells for you?
I remember trying to talk to this one a little bit the last time it had come up, just because I had run over the thing, but I don't really have any personal knowledge on it.
Well, so I did a little bit of investigation into this. First of all, so the security implementation in RCL relies on the file system, obviously, because that's how we find security files and stuff, and that's how the security implementation works. But it's not the only thing that uses environment variables. Like the RMW implementation environment variable, for example, is used there. If we needed to get rid of both of those, it would have to be, you'd have to specify those things at compile time, I guess. And so I'm wondering, so there are two ways to, the way to get rid of environment variables is you'd have to specify the RMW implementation you're using at build time. And then we can talk about how to extract the security bits, which would get rid of some more environment variables as well as the file system bits. And there are a couple of approaches we can take there. We can either remove it completely from RCL into its own thing, or we can just add a compile flag to enable or disable it. The problem I have with both approaches, something we need to consider, is that let's talk about a build flag. We could say enable security, and we could default to true, so it doesn't actually change into the way things are today. The problem is that doesn't actually prevent file system stuff from leaking in later. I wonder if, because the concern is not security related, the concern is file system related. It just so happens that we use file system stuff in the security bits. And so I'm having trouble coming up with a design that actually makes sense in a future proofing sense that actually meets this goal. Any thoughts on that?
So currently, we're tracing down the absolute file path and then passing that to the secure DDS layer through the config attributes. But I think the spec also supports is we can set, instead of setting a string to a path, we can set the string to be the PIM encoding of the certificate. So I was thinking, like, if you're on an embedded device or something, you would put this, in your flash about like the encoding of the PIM string, and then at runtime you would pass that as an argument.
That certainly gets rid of like one aspect of the file system related stuff, which is like the loading of it, but not it doesn't take care of the finding of it, right?
I think like if you were on an embedded system, then there would be no searching of, searching of key store, unless you wanted to have something even more fancy, where maybe you have a different encoding of a key store, like a PEM11 or something certificate blob that holds multiple keys. So yeah, it's something that needs to sort of sit in front and decide, like, you know, the abstraction.
What method to use, yeah.
I did want to jump in with one question here, and maybe I missed it in the earlier part of what you were saying, but I remember, you know, from the comments that are on there, you know, the original discussion in the issue was to simply move that functionality out of RCL itself into some sort of separate library. Is that still part of what the thought process is here, or are you strictly looking at ways to keep it where it is, but only have it, you know, but make it, you know, compile safe for this type of embedded device?
I think the end goal is the same, and so I wasn't trying to actually come up with a design. I was the challenge I'm trying to address here is the same challenge regardless of how we decide to actually solve this problem, whether it's a compile flag or whether it's extracting the security bits. And that is this: the security bits are not the problem. It's the fact that the security bits happen to use file system that's the problem. And so while extracting security related stuff will solve the problem now, it doesn't seem to directly address this with a design. You know what I mean? Like at nowhere in RCL do we say, let's not touch the file system. You know what I mean? And so if we extract security, whether that's with a compile flag or literally put it in another project, what's to say that RCL doesn't change in the future to get more file system related stuff? You know what I mean? That's really, so it's a bit of more of a meta problem than anything.
Well, if I'm understanding this correctly, and it's pretty likely that I'm not, but it sounds like we are dealing with a scenario where we don't have a file system in an embedded device. So
yes,
likely there is no operating system on this embedded device as well. Is there any way for... So is there any... My thought is, could we just have the build process in one of its directives try to detect if there is an operating system at all? And if there is an operating system, assume file systems are in place and do everything with the file system dependent stuff. Otherwise, use a non-file system based build approach.
If you look at the issue, what he talks about is cross-compiling. And so I suspect that, like, at build time, there's probably going to be some sort of file system, given that, like, it's pulling from the file system to build this stuff. But you're moving beyond my cross-compiler expertise in regards to, can it detect that it's building for something that doesn't have a file system?
If we're doing cross-compiling, it's been ages since I've done, not since my intern days, since I've done...
Yeah, it's been a while for me too.
Yeah, I used to work for a company that did some of that. But anyway, neither here nor there. But no, I don't think it would be able to detect across the wire, because usually what you're doing with these embedded devices is you compile on your system, then flash it over to the memory. But you could theoretically be able to set some kind of information about what the target that you're compiling for is. And you could say that I'm compiling for Linux, I'm compiling for Windows, I'm compiling for Mac, I'm compiling for embedded. And if it runs into embedded, it assumes by default there is no file system. And
yeah, that's moving a bit more in the direction that that makes a bit more sense, I think.
Because I don't know that there's, now that you mentioned the cross-compiling, I don't know that there's going to be a way for it to auto-detect at build time, because it's going to be building on a system that has a file system.
Right, exactly.
So we may, I think probably the best option to future-proof this entire thing, because there's probably a lot of other areas in the code that depend on file systems, not just security. Yeah, I'd say pass a build flag in saying we're doing this for embedded. This is embedded ROS.
That multiple projects could utilize then.
Yes.
So I think the question is that we want to expand the API so that users would have a programmatic method of passing in maybe directly the security artifacts they want. So maybe something that's just an abstraction over the specifically RMW DDS wrappers. Like if you look at how security is used in those, yeah, it's basically just setting the conventional DDS security enable bits and then passing the paths to those files. So we probably want some kind of switch where, yeah, depending on the build flags, we either use our file system wrapper to implicitly pull that from the runtime environment variables, or picking up on some expected struct values or something that the user would set, similar to like how a user can set the quality of service settings.
Yeah, so there are two aspects to this problem as we're chatting about it. I think we've broken it down. One is how to determine what capabilities are safe to use, right? And I think Jacob has a good path forward here with a build flag that I think we can flesh out. I'll take an action to go back to this issue and flesh that out a little bit with Jacob.
I do have one concern on that, but I'll wait for a bit.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to come back to that then. And then the other one is, given an embedded system where we don't have the file system, is there a way we can actually still make security work, right? And that's the direction you're going now. Yeah, Ruffin?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do we want to revisit the build flag real quick? Make sure we have a good direction forward before we switch to that.
Well, the thought that I have on the build flag is that you're going to be passing in the build flag when you're trying to build ROS on your system and all your packages, which means that we are going to be pushing off work onto all the maintainers of packages to define A, whether or not their package can even be built in embedded, and B, to provide a system of what is disabled in embedded. So that would probably increase their workloads by a little bit, and I could see some people getting a little annoyed. But
I mean, compare it to the way it is today, right? Where there is no build flag, and so people just kind of do whatever they want. This doesn't actually change the status quo. It just gives them the ability to say, you know what? I actually do want to support this use case. I'll detect it, and I'll do this specific thing. They don't have to, though, right? In which case, it changes nothing.
So should we make the status quo that packages do not support embedded by default, and then it's an opt-in thing for a package?
I would say, okay, so let me think about this. If I'm building for embedded right now, I assume that if I don't have a file system, it's not that it breaks at runtime, it's that it doesn't build. Does that seem accurate to everybody?
It could go either way, I think. Because like if you're running a C++ file system command, like you're trying to access the standard file system, you're going to try and make that call, and there's not going to be a file system for you to talk to. And
wouldn't that fail at like link time though? I don't know, maybe not.
Like I said, it's been a really long time since I've done embedded building. It may fail at link time. It may fail at link time. It will hopefully fail at link time. It may fail at runtime.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm not a embedded expert by any means, but I could certainly envision platforms where you could have the same, architecture that can run the same executables, and some of those, packages may have file system stuff, some of them may not. I don't know that the system architecture is going to prevent you from including file system stuff, even if the hardware doesn't have it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, given that we have no explicit way to determine if we're building for an embedded device, I think the status quo has to be that we don't explicitly support. It might work, right? But
so the package So if we do a disable by default, that means that we are going to have to go into all of the official ROS2 packages like RCL CPP, RCLPY, and all
And
that.
actually set them all. I see what you're saying. Versus assume that it's going to work everywhere, even though
Right.
it probably won't.
Right.
Um,
Personally, I'm sort of the cautious type. That's partially why I don't talk much during these meetings. so I'm more comfortable with the you have to explicitly opt in to the embedded, because I would say a fair assumption, maybe 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, somebody wants to build something for embedded. They want to build it once and they want it to run. And they want it to run for a very, very long time without any problems occurring. So having sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so that's basically my reasoning why I would want it to be an opt-in sort of thing, because that way you can guarantee to the person, hey, by me implementing this system for embedded, I have already done the work, dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and made sure that this is going to work for embedded.
but to your point, that does require every project to be updated to say, I don't support this, right?
No, it doesn't require them to say they don't support it. We just assume they don't by default.
It seems like we want like a community-wide kind of acknowledged build setting, like in Rust, you have like no STD. So
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
if you support that, then your package is smart enough to, accept that configuration and build artifacts that are support running environments with no standard library. So maybe this is something we could probably collab with, like micro ROS embedded team. I expect they
Yeah,
probably
the
have
embedded working group, that makes perfect sense.
some setting for that.
What could you add, Jess? Yes, we are here. So you want to incorporate some security features on top of micro ROS?
No, the what we're talking about is where's that link? It is here. Where the request is to support basically not relying on the file system in RCL, which is the thing that's currently relying on the file system are the security features. And so we're talking about ways to, instead of just kicking the can down the road and trying to fix that particular problem, we're trying to talk about ways to have a build flag that's available across the projects that you're building that says what type of platform you're targeting, whether that's Linux or some embedded device that doesn't have a file system. And then we could take appropriate action. And not only us, but any other package that needs to do special things for embedded devices as well, which really falls into the embedded working group's prerogative, right?
I see. And there is a comment from Borja that was running micro ROS until...
Yeah, I thought that was micro ROS related. What do you think of that general idea?
Well, I think for sure it's useful. Why not?
Yeah, okay. And I think we have arrived at a way that allows projects to opt into it, and so things don't, like, it doesn't turn into an additional maintenance burden, but it does require everyone to kind of agree on this build flag. So I think this will probably turn into a forum topic that we can discuss.
Yeah, we definitely would need to bring this in front of everybody and get everybody in, because it's a wide-reaching change.
Jaime, I'll probably ping you. I'll take the action of, well, first of all, I'm going to take an action of just talking on the GitHub issue there and making sure that would seem to solve the issue. And assuming it does, I'll bring it to the forum, at which point I'll ping you, Jaime, and you can bring the embedded working group in. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Okay. Jacob, are you feeling good about this now?
I think I've got my head wrapped around it somewhat.
Well, it'll obviously take more clear form as we get closer to it, but I think the direction is good.
I'll just have to check with my work and make sure. I actually no, this would fall. Roger, this would fall under what we're allowed to work on, right?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
And to be clear, I'm not trying to sign you up for this work. We're just coming up with a basic design, basically, and we'll continue talking about it. But obviously, if this is something you're interested in, go for it.
Oh, I'm interested in spitballing. I'll have to figure out where it fits in with what I'm doing, but yeah.
Excellent. Ooh, sorry, I've got a child eating behind me. All right, Ruffin, do you want to keep talking about ways we can continue to support security in an environment that's like this?
Okay, so are people familiar with like the call sites in various RMW layers like Connects and FastDDS on where those properties are set?
Some of us.
So I think aside from enabling encryption, there's a part where you set the path to the identity certificate, the private key, the signed permission documents for the governance, and just permissions. And so those are the four main kind of things we're searching in the, and then the public identity certificates of the permission CA and the there's another CA. Maybe it's the governance CA. Been a while.
Well, there's permission and identity, right?
Yeah. So those are roughly, I think, like the 5 file paths that we can all instead change from file paths to perm strings.
Do we know that all DDS implementations support that?
I know Connects does.
I mean, does FastDDS support embedding these files in the strings instead of passing file paths?
We can ask.
Had a crazy.
I am not
thought.
sure about that.
Yeah.
Iker?
No, I was also going to say that I'm not sure, but in any case, that should be fairly easy to implement.
Would that just be an RMW level thing, or is that something that would require potentially changes on FastDDS itself?
It would probably need some changes in FastDDS itself.
Okay, fair
Not
enough.
really sure in any case. I'm not really sure about it, but as I said, in any case, it should be fairly easy because at the end we are just reading the file content and embedding it into some parameters. So for us, it's quite the same just to take a string and plug it in.
Yeah, I think the DDS security spec kind of set it so that the argument API is the same whether you're passing a file of a path of a string or a PIM encoded string.
So I'm just taking a look at some of my notes, and for what it's worth, in the DDS spec, the URIs, and I think this is for all of the X509 certificates and so on. They can either be file, data, or PKS11 URIs. I've only ever worked with the file URIs, but I thought that all the vendors actually supported them.
The data would be the embedded one, I'm assuming.
Yeah, but I mean, while we're at it, URI might be just as useful. That way you could just pull it dynamically.
I was looking at documentation. At least in our case, we don't support to embed the contents in the environment variable, but it should be easy. So
Okay.
it wouldn't be a problem in our case.
So then,
I'm checking the same on the code, and yeah, we are not supporting it, but as we said, that should be fairly easy to implement.
so if we did that, then the only piece we need to worry about is obtaining those certificates and permissions documents and stuff. And I don't know what that looks like without a file system.
So without a file system, you'd basically be storing all the data that would normally go in a file somewhere in memory. And then you would have to have some way so that if somebody asked you, hey, I want to have XYZ file, your system would basically translate that to being, oh, it actually means XYZ stored over at memory address 6000, and picks up that memory and passes it back. To the external, I would imagine it would look like hopefully it would look like they're accessing a file system, but to the embedded, it would actually just pick up the data and pass it. Or pass a pointer to the data. Well, no, you don't want to pass a pointer to the data. That would be bad.
This sounds like it could be hardware specific. I don't have a clear vision of what this would look like generically.
You would just, so your certificates are either going to be, your certificate files, are they binary or are they text?
They're text.
They're text. Okay, so you just store a really, really long string somewhere in memory. Just assign it to some sort of a variable, and when somebody asks for it, give it.
But given that, let's see, you'd have to do that at like build time, right? You'd have to generate these things, put them in an elf someplace, or whatever is the equivalent, and load it when the rest of the thing runs, right? Which means that the whole key store concept would all need to be nailed down at build time. Yeah.
Something like that. If you really wanted it to, you could probably, oh gosh, I hate to say this, but because I feel icky, but you could probably figure out some way to make it as like a global static variable that you generate at the very beginning of warming up ROS. But that, like I said, that makes me feel icky. So if somebody knows a way to get rid of global statics, that would probably be better.
I mean, the only way I can see to solve this in a more configurable way than having to rebuild the thing, right, is to have some external CA, which we sort of talked about in the past, right? But we don't really have. That then provides certificates and identities, whether that's over the network or over something other than the file system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So users have a way of setting the QoS properties within the context. I think we just need a way of similarly setting struct values for the security attributes, and then the user application could do all the logic on where they want to source these security bits. Would it be over the wire, or would it be in the flash, or would it be something that has an interface the user to the device would put in with a PIM or a TPM device or something like that.
I actually thought of a good analogy for people that have not worked on programming an embedded system before. Just try and imagine yourself writing a program. You're not allowed, the only things that you're allowed to have are just variables. So instead of going and picking up and reading data from a file, you just read data from that variable, if that helps at all. So you would need to find some way in order to create the data that could be referenced by that variable and could be passed from that variable on command. Whether that's at build time or if it's hard-coded into the code to begin with, well, no, that wouldn't work. Never mind. So yeah, probably a build or link time. I think there are ways that you can Has anybody else here programmed embedded before? Nobody?
I mean, back in my university days, right? So it sounds like about as much as you.
Well,
Nothing
yeah.
more than hobby stuff.
Oh,
Or
my university
Texas
here,
Instruments
I was working.
Industrial.
Oh, sorry.
I worked at Texas Instruments Industrial Communication. She had like using MSP 4030s and various SPI, I2C, serial bridging interfaces.
Okay, so please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going out on the limits of what I've been able to do. I did it back in my university days, although my university is weird in that you actually have to work at the university. So I actually did this at my job. But I think it might be some way for you to define locations in, yeah, it's Kettering. I think there might be some way for you to define locations in memory where data is stored and store that data either at the compile or the link phase. Because when you're setting up an embedded computer, when you're flashing it, you are setting up the entire memory layout and everything. You're actually telling the memory, this area is where my program lives, this area is where my data lives. Stuff like that. So maybe it's possible to.
Well, I mean, even it sounds like it would be doable to do this at build time, where you just essentially generate one big array.
Yes.
And so the challenge is not how do we accomplish this in a technical manner. It's how do we actually make that at all user friendly? Because the whole reason for structuring nodes like this and doing the security work we're doing is so that you can run different combinations of nodes and secure them differently, right? And as soon as you have to generate that at build time, you're kind of stuck. Like I'm having trouble.
The user would probably just write some bit of code that would maybe read over a SD card or SPI interface or something, pull that memory into RAM, set the attribute field, and then call the rest of the stack. You could hard code it into the binary executable, but I think in practice you wouldn't, because you maybe build the binary one and send it over all the devices, right? So
or somebody
it's just like making sure that users have access to set these security bits themselves, so they can do it arbitrarily, rather than having to rely on some hidden logic that maybe make it convenient to run it on the desktop.
I wonder if we could look into having one version of ROS security. I mean, we could assume that there is some hardware security bit, right? And if we add support for some of those over time, that might be a good path forward instead of talking about ways to build it into the binary. But that would move us toward a sort of plug-in model for ROS security, which adds some complexity.
How about this? Why don't we set up a combination meeting between us and the embedded working group? Because the embedded working group this is what they do. They do embedded.
They have the expertise that we need.
Yeah, they have the expertise that we need. We, for the most part, know what our security needs are. They, for the most part, know how embedded works. So we could just figure out some way for us to combine our talents and figure out a way that we can build a embedded style, or at least an embedded branch of the code.
Yeah, I think that probably makes sense. Ruffin, what do you think?
Yeah, that's what I was originally suggesting, is a good talk to the embedded micro group.
I seem to have shamelessly stolen your idea. I apologize.
I guess I missed that. Jaime, when is your next meeting? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's tomorrow.
Oh, well, that's helpful. Let's see. It's not. Oh wait, here we go.
So
Okay, it's tomorrow morning. Ruffin, Roger, Jacob, do you guys think you guys could make that tomorrow morning? I don't know what kind of agenda they have, but
Well, my email and calendar is currently down, but I'm racking my brains and not coming up with anything tomorrow morning. So
Could you paste the exact time in the matrix chat?
yeah, that would probably be good.
yeah, I'll send you the details. It's on the ROS events calendar for tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, I think I would be available for that. I know I've got something else, but I think it's in the afternoon rather than the morning.
Okay, I have a class, so I won't be able to make it. But if you guys can come up with the design, I think that would be awesome.
Oh, I actually do have a meeting all day tomorrow. However, I think I can duck out for this. This is important.
Okay, well let's continue that conversation in Riot. Make sure that or in Matrix, make sure that they even have an agenda slot for us. Otherwise, we can set up our own sort of ad hoc meeting with them.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm guessing the ad hoc might be the better way to go about it, just because we'd be needing to pull in a different group of people. The folks from here may not be all that involved in the other topics they're going to need to discuss during their meeting.
Yeah, don't want to really ambush them, I guess. All right, so do we want to do an ad hoc instead?
That might be the better option.
Jaime, is that okay with you?
sorry, I get you very well.
We want to talk a bit more about how to do ROS security on embedded, but we're quickly reaching the limits of our embedded knowledge, and so we'd like to set up an ad hoc meeting with the embedded working group. Would that be okay with you?
Well, it's okay, but I don't know if we have enough time to prepare that for tomorrow.
No, and that's what we're saying. Instead of doing that tomorrow, how about we schedule just an ad hoc meeting between us? Is that okay?
Is that okay? Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, we can talk more about that later then. We have run a bit over. I apologize.
I blame myself. I talk a lot.
Oh, this was excellent. Yeah, lots of good progress here, I think.
So I think on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Not too much other stuff. I'll add the action items on there. If you have any comments on the action items, let me know. And close out the one for security use cases, because I think Ruffin's auto-aware use case is a good starting point. And Ruffin, I'm still going to leave you on the hook for talking a little bit more about that when you're ready.
Yeah, still logging through AutoAware.
Yeah.
They're still migrating to Foxy.
So unless anyone has anything else, and I also encourage you to add topics to the agenda. We're always kind of the last minute looking to see if there's anything to discuss, and we always get into good discussions during the meeting. So if you have anything, please drop it, and I'll try to troll Matrix to make sure I pick up anything that would be worth discussing as well. So, anybody have anything else before we close? All right. I think we're good. Thanks. And I'll see you. I think we're 2 weeks out for our next meeting.
Thanks, everybody. Good talking with you.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.